Okay, so let's talk about the coup thing for a second. Biden actually shared his thoughts on whether or not he felt like him basically having his hand forced and dropping out of the 2024 electoral race was a coup.
No doubt, Donald Trump is saying it was a coup. Takes out of the race.
I think he has a problem.
That's it. That sums it up.
Yeah, but no, okay. So let's be fair here. So what happened on January 6th, that was a hard coup. That was a plot by a sitting president to try and end the legislative branch to remove their check on his power and, to stop the peaceful transfer of power from him to the duly elected president. That was a hard coup.
Yep.
This was not that, but this was a soft coup in this sense. It's basically the idea that in terms of being like a president running for election, it's election year, you're this close to the election, the media has turned on you. They're obsessed with making sure that you lose the election. There's no way in these modern times that a sitting president can go to war with the media that's doing that to you and also go to war with half of the members of Congress in your own party. It's a recipe for failure, a disaster nonetheless. And once you're in a position where the party is ready to go to war with you to get you off the ticket, there's nothing, they can't fire you. You're in office, but they can make sure you lose the election. And given just the stakes involved with the second Trump administration, it would have been, obviously they didn't leave Biden a lot of choice.
I think what they didn't bank on, what they were hoping was that they would push him out and leave the Dems in disarray, that there would be this power vacuum and people fighting for a spot going into the convention and that it would be a splintered convention. It would be chaos.
Yeah, the media wanted that narrative.
Was the exact opposite because they have spent the past 3.5 years just talking about how Kamala Harris hasn't done anything, that she's unlikable, the turnover in her part of the administration. So they were building her up to be this unlikable. So they did not think that she would have this force of power and support behind her. They did not. They didn't see that at all.
Never underestimate a woman.
And that was a total and that was a total misread, not understanding what happened in 2020 when Biden chose her as his vice president. That was, apart from Trump's mishandling of the pandemic, largely the reason that, Biden powered his way into the White House, especially, when in states like Georgia and Arizona. I mean, Arizona may be less so, but obviously without her on the ticket, Biden's chances of getting black people to turn out in massive numbers the way they did in 2020 probably would have been the difference that, cost them a state like Michigan and definitely Georgia. And if you lose, or I guess, Pennsylvania as well.
Detroit, Atlanta, Philly.
Yeah, all them cities, predominantly black or huge black populations turned out in massive support. And in those states, he won by a handful of thousands of votes, and we were probably the difference maker. And the reason there was so much enthusiasm to get out and vote, apart from just being anti-Trump, but being pro-Biden Harris. Yeah, and Harris is a part of that.
I think that, and for anybody to say that, she wasn't popular, then you obviously haven't been paying attention to her, because everywhere she goes, she got mad love. That's why she has a K hive.
Yeah,
she filled up two stadiums at once.
You got the K hive. You got the K hive. I was like, y'all just weren't paying attention. You were sleeping.
But here's what that is, though. That narrative that she's quote unquote unlikable. Guess where that started? Fox News. Same thing they did. I know, because I've watched the clips. Same thing they did to Hillary. They did to Biden, and they were preparing to do it to Kamala Harris by starting this thing like, hey, if we convince enough of right-wing supporters that Harris is unlikable, then the media will just do the polling on Kamala Harris, and the polling will come back saying she's unlikable. Obviously, the media, over the course of the entire Biden administration, how many times have you seen mainstream media anywhere sit down and talk to Biden voters? It ain't never happened. You never see it. It's like a ban on talking to people who voted for Biden in 2020, even though it was more people that ever voted. More people voted for Biden than any other presidential candidate in history.
And they couldn't find 3 people. And
they erase us. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. But that's how you know the fix was in. Because that's your proof. It's in the pudding. And the pudding tastes like defeating Republicans.
Well, see, the thing is that now Republicans are behind her too. So when they go up in a place and they think they're getting their asses lit up, and I love it for them. They're getting shock face, so they can't really skew the polls because even Republicans, where they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go in this ruby red area here, and they're like, I kind of like her. Oh,
Yeah, she's fun, she's charming, she's smart, I hate to say that thing, but well spoken.
She's articulate.
I won't say that.
And Waltz absolutely was.
Oh, but she's a very effective communicator, which is not something that can be said about everyone.
No, she is, and in a way that's novel compared to what we've had the past, 20 years in the White House. Obviously, George Bush was a fucking moron, and Dick Cheney was also a weirdo, and then Obama had a rock star quality to him, but it was measured, right? Trump, obviously, he's got the appeal to the dumbest people on planet Earth, and Biden has a way of speaking.
Also the most evil.
That's true.
Yeah,
that part.
Biden is effective communicator in terms of like relating to people. He won't use the most egregiously complicated language, but he's effective and thoughtful and empathetic, and that comes across to people. That's why people look at him as like, Uncle Joe. But she's got a thing about her that is, model-esque, I suppose. She's definitely got her own version of a rock star quality, which is why if you like to open up the TikTok and look at the political content, she's got like hit TikTok clips. Just she goes viral every time she opens her mouth, and not to mention she's got a lot of star power behind her, especially in the Black community. Obviously, why are you giggling?
No, I was just thinking about Walls, and I was watching him. Was it in Milwaukee or one of his other ones? And you know how animated he is, and just go. And I'm sitting in bed and I'm watching this clip on my phone, and I'm thinking, Howard Dean is looking at him like, ain't this a bitch?
That's so funny. Because Howard Dean made one weird noise and we got his ass up out of there. That was it.
And I'm like, Howard Dean's got to be sitting there like, ain't this a bitch?
Carol, you remember that Howard Dean moment? Were you
He's like, got to be feeling some type of way right now.
Were you like engaged with news and political coverage at the time when Howard Dean
was just, you mean his introduction?
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is like, I remember.
Well, yeah, and it was like, and Howard Dean was super excited.
No, he got
and all he did was
he got a little too high. Woo! And then we got him up out of there. He's like, hell no, son. We let Dick Cheney shoot a motherfucker in the face, but Howard Dean, dog, you got to go. It's crazy. Mind how things have changed. But yeah, if Biden is like has that uncle energy, then Tim Walz has that pops energy. And people are rocking with it. In a way that, again, in the ways that the convention used those videos to kind of paint Trump as nothing like the average person, Tim Walz is like everybody's, well, if you're white, everybody's dad or granddad.
That one that'll get out there and the music's going and start dancing. You be like, Dad, come on.
But he'll also hit a little juke though, and it'll be like, oh yeah, he doing it up. Yeah. Yeah, but he'll also take you hunting and take you fishing, and he'll cook dinner, and he'll also pop a glass of champagne, which is like he's He's everything you would want. Like in every way that you might think of Kamala Harris as a candidate and what she may be lacking in terms of being able to relate to the average person. Not saying that she doesn't, but in specific areas where you might look at her and say, well, she could use this, and this. You have a counterpart that presents that in Tim Walz, and it was a perfect pick. Obviously, again, we talked about this at this election. She narrowed the list down to a handful of people, including Shapiro in Michigan, and he's been crushing it here lately. He's committed to making sure Harris wins Pennsylvania, and I don't think that would have been a bad pick. But having seen Tim Walz, it's like, how could you? Yeah, how could you not? You could not go.
And also too, like I said, like I was saying, like I think that even though Walz is only 2 years older than Harris, he does to present older. And that I think resonates with the rural, the older Republican that are still normal.
It's in the same way that Biden and Trump are basically the same age, but people think of Biden as older, even though they're the same age, even though it's just Biden sounds old and Trump.
No, Trump's energy is manic energy. It's maniac energy.
Yeah, like, I was gonna say it is white powder energy. Not white power. It's also that he's got white power energy, but he also has white powder energy.
It's a bit of both. Yeah.
Bit of both. Yeah. So moving on, there was reporting by PBS of Donald Trump and we know that he's had conversations with Netanyahu over the past year. But there was reporting by PBS about the subject matter of those communications. And well, obviously it's as bad as you could possibly think.
And we know that Secretary of State Blinken is over there right now working with Netanyahu. The reporting is that former President Trump is on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel, urging him not to cut a deal right now because it's believed that would help the Harris campaign.
Ooh, all you free Palestine people, man, y'all been protesting the wrong guy. So obviously, if you've paid attention to reporting, Biden's been trying to cut a deal to basically end the war in Gaza, likely with the plan for a second state in Israel, one for Palestine, one for Israel, over the past 8 months now. And that was even as he was negotiating a ceasefire deal in the winter of last year. He's actually gotten Hamas to the table numerous times, and they've agreed to multiple versions of a ceasefire in principle. But Netanyahu would always haggle over the details, find a handful of things that he didn't like, change the deal. Then Hamas would disagree, and it would just keep this war going in perpetuity, at least as it appears. Well, now that it's been made public that Trump's been pressuring Netanyahu to just keep this war going long enough to hurt the Democratic chances of winning in November, since the protesters typically only protest Democrats. And now, part of the reason why the war is waged on this long and, Netanyahu
and Bibi wants to stay out of prison because they can't have elections unless there is a ceasefire until the war is over. So he's got other reasons.
Yeah, both of them are willing to let as many more people die as they have to stay out of prison. I mean, and this would be the second time, well, more than the second time recently, but this is one of the second big examples of Trump choosing himself over the country. We have this and him preventing a border deal.
He's made multiple decisions that have hurt entire groups of people. It's not just this, like even the situation with the Kurds where we basically abandoned them yet again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They deserve better. Our allies
sabotaged Afghanistan and then wouldn't share the details with the Biden administration during the transition of power.
Yeah. And also the fact that they didn't even have a COVID plan to roll out the vaccine. They wouldn't share that information, which if Biden had just known, they would have had, 2 months to get that going and be ready to hit the ground running. But alas, Trump using his political position to not only continue a war, but just also that he manages to do all this stuff and not face any accountability or blame for that matter. People just like, they're like, oh, well, that's Trump. Like, no, protest
Yes, it's
that guy.
also illegal. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's also that. I mean, so people have been commenting, legal Twitter's been on fire since those revelations, talking about the Logan Act. And I got to tell you, with this Supreme Court, first of all, like, they're not going to, like, even the charges aren't going to stick. And even if they somehow let it go to trial, I think it would be extraordinarily difficult to get a jury to convict on this. Probably just two reasons. One, like, the theory is so abstract that it would be difficult. Like, as a candidate for president, you do have a wide latitude to, campaign and talk with members of foreign countries, but also just is so unproven. Like, I don't really like legal scholars out there probably laughing.
He's testing everything. You know what I mean?
I think I think it's been something like 80 years since like a Logan Act prosecution. And it's just such an underdeveloped, like, area of law. I don't know how easy it would be to convince a jury for these charges to stick. I mean, and also just like the process of getting the trial would be long and drawn out. And I've always been on this kick since we started the podcast. I've been like, hey man, dude's committed so many crimes and his lawyers are so bad. Hurry up and charge him with anything. Just charge him with something, charge him with anything. And even if it's a traffic ticket, he'll end up going to jail.
I do have a question. Is Merrick Garland dead?
No, Merrick Garland, look.
Is he still alive? Because I haven't heard hide nor hair.
Yeah, but see, you thinking of it in terms of like TV lawyer, like he's supposed to be out here holding press conference.
But but at this point though, and I get that. And if we were in ordinary times, I totally get it, but we're not. And right now, we as a public, we need assurances that something's going on, that something is getting done. Okay. And I understand he also can't reveal all of his hands because there's some shit that he's got to do.
First of all, he can't come out publicly and talk about Trump because Trump's under indictment, and those statements would be used by the defense counsel in court at trial to paint the prosecution as political. So he's not going to comment about Trump. Sorry. I mean, once Trump was indicted, that was the end of that. And the other thing is, like, again, I hate to say this because it took forever to get a Trump indictment, but Merrick Garland is largely responsible for Trump being indicted in both cases. Like, all of the information that Jack Smith used to indict Trump, most of that was gathered under Garland, and like including signing off on the search warrant in Mar-a-Lago that got the documents back. Like, and the reason why Trump probably didn't get charged before he announced he was running for office is because Judge Cannon down there even delayed the investigation by like holding up the execution, like the use of the recovered materials for like a month or two.
And Trump also preemptively announced he was running. He did it he knew what was coming, and he announced way before a candidate generally announces, like 8 months ahead of that time. So then by the time
4 months to 5 months.
No, it was longer than that. I think it was longer than that because
you mean officially announced it, or he kept teasing
like
it?
When he
officially announced it November of 2022, right after the election, which is it's super early. Typically, campaigns really start ramping up as early as the next summer, but spring's not unusual. But like November, 2 years before, that's unheard of. But he did that to specifically to avoid prosecution.
Yes, and so he could say they're going after Biden's political opponent, and that became the narrative from the beginning. As soon as things were coming down.
Well, I'll tell you why that likely delayed prosecution more than people give Garland credit for, and credit Jack Smith for. It actually delayed it at least by a month or so, because from what I understand, the first thing Jack Smith did when he took over the investigation, not that the investigation stopped, but it was like, all right, we got to start over from scratch. We got to look at every detail all the way up from like the beginning of every investigation. We got to like cross all our T's, dot all our I's. We got to look at every detail. I want to know everything. And that decision to just reiterate the evidence to a new guy to make sure the case was airtight, because obviously, he would be worried about if he filed charges, if they're not airtight, they could get overturned on appeal or fall apart in front of the Supreme Court or, any such matter. And while, of course, I do want someone that thorough and that thoughtful, and I'm grateful for that, that probably delayed his prosecution by another month or two. So, Merrick Garland likely had charges almost ready to go. He was just waiting to finalize the information from that search warrant so they could get that ready to go. Because they would look like that investigation into the classified documents and the instruction that was still continuing right up until the indictment came out. So, with the need to crime fraud, accept Trump, like all of that shit. We talked about this previously. But anyway, yeah. So speaking of which, what Merrick Garland is doing behind the scenes, I can't speak to unless there's some public movement by the Justice Department. And we actually had that in a surprise revelation where the FBI searched the home or some kind of ranch or sort of like 100 acres of Dimitri Simes. Now, if you're not familiar with that is, you probably haven't read the Mueller report. I'll just say that there. So after the Mueller investigation concluded, and Bill Barr a lot about the contents, so one of the key figures that we discovered in the Mueller report that just hadn't been mentioned publicly at all was this figure, Dimitri Simes. What was the organization he was the head of? I think it was the, is the DNI? Is that it? Anyway, largely unimportant. He was a figurehead at this political think tank. He's a Russian American who immigrated here, I think in the 70s, and set up shop, involved with the numerous political figures, and did a lot of business with other Russian Americans. Hence the reason why he had like a massive ranch. That figure also, according to the way I understood the Mueller report, he was likely connected to Russian intelligence, if not an agent himself. But Mueller couldn't prove direct connections to Soviet or Russian intelligence, and also couldn't directly prove that Dimitri Simes committed a crime. But there were numerous contacts between the Trump campaign and him, likely some form of coordination between Simes and the Russian government in their efforts to help Trump win the 2016 election. But because Mueller was tasked with just proving criminality and not counterintelligence, we don't know what happened to the counterintelligence portion of the investigation, but as far as the election was concerned, they couldn't prove any crimes, or at least they weren't given enough time to, because Bill Barr shut the investigation down. But I've been wondering for a long time, where did that guy go? Like, where did that investigation go? Because Simes eventually packed up, headed back to Russia, rekindled his relationships with Soviet intelligence. I think he got a job on, a job speaking on Russia Today. All kinds of perks associated with, a successful counterintelligence campaign when you go back home, much like Maria Butina, who was also connected to Dimitri Simes, which is also extraordinarily strange. Also, that guy, so if you're listening to this, you may remember the whole Hunter Biden fiasco where it appeared as though Republicans had some kind of insight in his relationships, in Hunter Biden's relationships in Ukraine, his business relationships, saying he took a bribe. Well, the guy who fed them that information was also a Russian agent. And guess who that Russian agent was connected to? Dimitri Simes. So it's a small world, right? So I've been wondering, where did the counterintelligence investigation go? Like, did they just let this guy run wild? Well, apparently they've been keeping tabs on him this entire time. While, yes, they couldn't prove that he committed any crimes, I'm assuming that they picked up some information on, communications between him and other Russian agents. And it resulted in a search warrant being executed on his house. Who knows what the fuck they found? But I would imagine if it's connected to the 2024 presidential campaign and they want to tie up loose ends, look, so DOJ has this policy where you don't make any take any overt investigatory steps 60 days before I'm sorry, I'm boring you to death. Where you don't I know it's a lot, right? So DOJ has this policy where you practically
To
don't
our
take
listeners who know, it's almost midnight where I am.
yeah,
Every week the same.
She's an East Coast girl, and we started late. My bad, yo. But so DOJ won't indict or take any overt investigative steps that can affect a political campaign 60 days before an election. Now, it's not like a law, but it's a policy. But of course, you can make exceptions, I'm sure. But if they were, whatever evidence they recovered from Psalms, if they want to put that to use here, I think we're 80 days out. So we've got like
77.
Also, they're not recovering new evidence. What you just said to me is like, they can't continue their previous investigations.
No. So what I'm with this search warrant, right?
Good.
They got evidence. They have some kind of information that gives them probable cause to believe there's evidence that could prove there was a commission of a crime at the crime scene. And that evidence has to be relatively fresh for them to execute that search warrant. And whatever evidence they recovered at his house, I'm assuming if it's related to the 2024 election or the Trump campaign or any kind of Republican candidate, they've got about 17 days left if they want to file charges in such a way that it could potentially affect the election. If they want to stay in line with the DOJ policy, just keep that in mind. So, mark this date on the calendar, and then 2 weeks from, look at this date on the calendar, 2 weeks from now, mark that day. And if you see some strange shenanigans coming from Republicans anywhere in Congress or the Trump campaign, you'll know something is up and something big might be coming.